Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next The Rise of Kyoshi chapter analysis video. This one's going to be for chapter 29, which is called The Ambush. This is a Jianzhu focused chapter again. It's kind of the last Jianzhu centric one, because obviously we've only got a few chapters left at this point. And it's just meant to be the one where he finally, I suppose, properly locates Kyoshi, but his sort of political rivalries over the course of the book are sort of coming to a head. So everything is sort of crumbling a little bit around him, and it's just his desperate kind of moves to stay in the game, basically, in all of this. Again, keep in mind what he said in one of the previous chapters, that, you know, the Paisho analogy of just like, even if he knows he's ultimately losing a game, he'll play it out to the very end and make it as difficult as possible the entire way. And that's his approach in basically everything. So, we start off this chapter with Jianzhu back in Yokoya, of course. There's Heiran here. And again, he's not telling the full story about all of this. It's revealed here that by Heiran that Hui has started doing some really big moves politically, money's being transferred, that sort of stuff, about a week ago. Jianzhu figures out that, of course, this was the hawk, the messenger hawk that Seifel, the swordsman who was hired by Hui from the last Jianzhu chapter, had sent to Hui to inform him about the avatar being in Daofei hands. Heiran is kind of beginning to figure some of this out, and she just wants to see her daughter again, is basically the idea. I don't care about the avatar anymore, I want my daughter back, is what she says. She's done, and it says here, Jianzhu, he was surprised at her lack of endurance. As far as she knew, her daughter and the avatar weren't in any particular danger. Of course, the reality was that they absolutely were, if they were in the hands of outlaws, but Heiran didn't know that. So it's one of those ones where, you know, Heiran is Jianzhu's kind of main ally in all of this, but he hasn't kept her in the loop. And here's her ultimately just kind of giving up. She just wants her daughter back and it to end this way. And she's just been kind of supporting Jianzhu in all of this because getting Kyoshi back pretty much means getting Rangi back. But anyway, he says to her here, we may even find Kyoshi before then. The facts will come out immediately in that case. I'd lose the avatar, but you'd be reunited with your daughter. She does thank him, but he does note that I have a lot of mail to get through. And then we cut to the next scene, and it's basically revealed that what he was saying there was sort of a lie. He's not going to just let it end like that. He still wants the avatar on his side, and he's going to do anything he can to make that happen. So, he gets a letter from Governor Tei. So, this may initially sound, and I think when you read it the first time, it might seem like, oh, like Tei has betrayed Kyoshi and stuff like this. But Tei doesn't know Kyoshi and Jianzhu have this rivalry. What's revealed here is just that Tei is one of these governors, one of these, you know, high up political people who is part of like Jianzhu's kind of connections. And this is just Jianzhu getting some benefit out of, you know, having put some effort in with Governor Tei. And so he gets this letter of basically Tei's report on what just happened, and this alerts him to where Kyoshi is, plus the fact that a lot of other stuff happened. The whole Zhu Ping-an being dead, that whole thing, the fact that, you know, glowing eyes, avatar state. He connects it all together through this letter. But it's noted here, the message from the boy governor was written in a sloppy, rushed hand, devoid of the flourishes that normally came with high-level correspondence. The only authentication was the personal seal, which officials kept on the person at all times. It was as if Tei had written it somewhere other than his palace and was in great distress. So yeah, the scroll crumpled in Jianzhu's hand as he read about Zhu Ping-an's jailbreak. His veins threatened to burst from his flesh and skitter away. And here's the explanation from Jianzhu's point of view about why apparently he is credited in history as being the one who killed Zhu Ping-an. He was the one who took down the Yellownecks. Jianzhu explaining here how this all came about. Against every inclination, Jianzhu had kept the leader of the Yellownecks alive as a favor to his Fire Nation allies so they could study how the man was capable of bending lightning. It was a skill so rare that some of them thought it a folk tale or a secret that had been lost to the ages. Either way, it made Zhu a valuable, dangerous specimen, and Tei, who owned one of the most defensible prisons in the region, had managed to let him escape. He then reads the full account. There'd been an attempt on Tei's life. Two assassins had almost killed him, but the last minute had decided to show mercy. An old man whose description Jianzhu didn't recognize, and a girl, the tallest girl that Tei had ever seen. And unless his panic had addled his mind, he'd seen her bend earth and air. Jianzhu leaned back in his chair. So this is him putting this all together, piecing it together. And this last little bit of the letter that Jianzhu reads, I think, tells us that Tei had no real ill intent in regards to Kyoshi and what he had said to Kyoshi. He's actually trying to go ahead with Kyoshi's ideas. He ignored the superfluous details that ended the letter. Something about painted faces and how Tei needed to end the cycle of grifting that his family had been so deeply ensconced in, and could Master Jianzhu spare a few lessons in wiser governance and blah blah blah. It literally says blah blah blah. It's just showing Jianzhu not caring ultimately about really helping him to become a better governor or leader. He's got information on Kyoshi. That's all he's caring about right now. But it is interesting, Tei wanting to become a better governor after the encounter with Kyoshi. But it's also showing Jianzhu not thinking things through correctly. He ignores the details about painted faces. And we'll see that this is ultimately going to sort of backfire on him, because if he had maybe thought about it more, he might have realized that the painted faces might have meant the Dao Fei Group Flying Opera Company. It's unclear if Jianzhu actually knows about this group or not. And this could have been something that might have told him right here and now that Kyoshi was actually part of a Dao Fei group, but he doesn't piece that together here because he's just happy to have this kind of back on track. He does question though, but what on earth was she doing? She had left Taihua and reached Tei's palace before the full moon, which meant she was moving at a reasonable pace. Her actions didn't sound like those of a captive. So he gets another letter which basically tells them that Zhu Ping'an had been murdered by a spirit with glowing eyes, drenched in blood and white ashes, who had carried Zhu into the sky before sucking the life-giving flame out of his body and consuming it for herself. The captain thought that Zhu Ping'an had died years ago at Zulu Pass, and he wanted information from Jianzhu on this. So glowing eyes, Jianzhu thought. He'd seen those eyes close up before and nearly lost his life. He'd made a quick mental map of Yusheng and found that the fleeing bandits could very well have seen the avatar between Tei's palace and Zygon village. Alright then, things were looking up. With some slight adjustments, he'd have the avatar back under his roof. He didn't understand what she was doing or why, but he didn't care. He had her location and he had time. And then it wasn't until the next morning that he found out he had run fresh out of the ladder, that being time. So he feels he has time because he thinks that Hui is going to spend a lot of time preparing and getting everything perfect for his big strike politically against Jianzhu to take him out of really the picture as being anyone involved with the avatar. But what happens is that basically tons of very, very, very important people suddenly appear at his house, at the mansion in Yokoya. Heiran wasn't expecting this, and obviously Jianzhu wasn't expecting it either. So Hui turns up with basically, every other sage and important person in the Earth Kingdom who is not directly part of Jianzhu's, political sphere. So the ones that aren't part of that connective tissue, of course, are kind of the ones who support Hui and are against Jianzhu. All of his opponents turn up at his door. So this is where we get some interesting descriptions. Herbalist Pan from Taku. Now that's interesting because Taku is of course the place where Aang meets the herbalist, who again is a herbalist, carrying his pet cat in his arms. So of course the herbalist that we know of had her pet cat Miyuki. And it's just continuing that on, that Taku, at this time, a thriving city, has a sage of its own who is known as the herbalist. Then when we see that place in Avatar, it is a pretty much ruined city with the idea that this has been one of the places hit pretty hard by the Fire Nation. And this is where you begin to actually, this book kind of helps you to realize kind of some of the stuff that you almost don't really think about in Avatar about, oh yeah, like Zhao throughout that book constantly has these bases, and they're clearly in the Earth Kingdom, and you realize that, okay, these are some of the places the Fire Nation's already taken over, have turned into bases for themselves, and Taku was an example of a place that was taken out completely, and so they still have a herbalist left. I assume from the same line as herbalist Pan here, they still have the whole tradition of cats in a way, and herbalist and being herbalist, but the difference of thriving has a sage of its own, very important person, versus later on, like burned out, the herbalist that we meet is a crazy person and stuff like that. Next person, General Sayuk, the Lord Commander of Do Huan Fortress. Now, as far as I'm aware, I probably need to do a little bit more research into this. Do Huan Fortress is not a specific place I think we've heard about before. Now, it may be revealing to us the name of General Fong's fortress from episode 1 of book 2, Earth, the Avatar State. Obviously, that takes place in an Earth Kingdom fortress, and it would make sense because they do confirm that all of these places are basically the entire northwestern coast of the Earth Kingdom for allies. So these are all places considered to be part of the north and west of the Earth Kingdom, and I think we know that that fortress that General Fong had was in the west, so that would make sense. That would be a nice reveal if that is indeed what it's meant to be. It's hard to connect it together without 100% confirmation, but General Fong, there's a general here, they're specifically calling him the commander of a specific fortress. That's what Fong was. I think it's a nice connection, and it sort of all fits together. Another person, he's sort of cut off in all of this. Sage Ryong of Po Huai. Now, Po Huai is the fortress from the episode The Blue Spirit. That's that whole facility there. So that's interesting that they had a sage as well. So that's interesting. Anyway, so yeah, Jianzhu is completely taken by surprise here. Hui has acted so much quicker than he expected by building up everyone against him and all of this. So, and there's one last person actually here. Zhang Dako, or Daku, Dakou, was here too, Jianzhu noted dryly. No Zhang worth his salt would pass up an opportunity to humiliate a Ganjin. And it's just, that's only like the second time in the book that they've reminded you of the fact that Jianzhu is actually from the Ganjin tribe. Like, you forget that because it was mentioned so early on. And so them bringing up the Zhangs for the first time here is a great connection and showing that they have sort of a sage-like character, a character who's considered a sort of political higher-up as well. And again, noting the issues between the Ganjins and the Zhangs. Showing you that as well, the whole history of both of their tribes, it goes back way, way further than just Kyoshi's timeline. So whatever the whole issue was with the founders of these two clans and whatever the actual story ends up being about the whole story from the Great Divide, it goes back before this, either way. But I just love the world building here of that. And again, one of the best villains we've kind of seen in Avatar is a Ganjin tribe member. It's so funny to think about, but not funny because Jianzhu is a very serious villain and has so much character, but it's interesting. Anyway, yeah, so this is where we get the setup. The last couple of pages, there's not a lot of details specifically to talk about here. It's just generally what happens. So he immediately gets into being the humble host position. He's not going to give away that he's been taken by surprise here. You know, well, let's get you all inside and refreshed. So this is obviously a huge surprise, and we go to Auntie Mui in the kitchen, and she's freaking out that, like, oh my god, like, so many people have arrived. Will we have to feed them lunch or dinner or what? And Jianzhu's just like, calm down. Start off with tea. That's all they'll probably want. They're just here to do business. They just need something. And she says, of course, master. It would be impossible to discuss important matters without tea. I just like that sort of a joke of just like, yeah, that's just a funny little thing of just like, nothing will get done unless everyone has tea. And then, yeah, basically the last couple of pages is, it appears like nothing's really going on. It's just Hui starts to talk to Jianzhu, and suddenly it really comes out. You know, he's really calling him out for, you don't deserve to be with the Avatar. Jianzhu begins to counter back, you know, and who are you? You know, you just want power. And it seems like all that's happening here is it's Jianzhu losing his cool. But then, very end of the chapter, Jianzhu begins to start to stumble around. His insides heaved in and out. His vision went blurry. What is going on? He shouted at Hui. What did you do to me? "What do you mean?" Hui tried to stand but collapsed back into his chair. He put his hand to his nose in astonishment. It was covered in blood. "What's happening?" someone shouted. Sounds of vomiting filled the hall. A servant opened up the door behind Jianzhu to see what the commotion was and screamed. Jianzhu collapsed forward, his upper body slamming against the table. He couldn't see Heiran, but like a needle of a compass, his hand reached towards her as he blacked out. So, this is one of those ones where like you have to read on next to find out what's actually happened here. But I will bring the context from the future chapters into this. What Jianzhu has done here is that he has poisoned basically everyone with the tea. You don't really see him do it, but it's just explained in the later chapters that this is what he's done. So he has purposefully taken out all of these important people, including Hui, and all these important sages from basically the entire leadership structure of the north and west of the Earth Kingdom. He's just effectively killed right here. And to keep it sort of a secret, he's started this argument and made it seem like Hui was doing it to him, as Jianzhu is one of the first people to collapse. Now, this is where they're going to bring in the idea that, oh, where did they bring up poison resistance training? Much earlier on in the book, Sifu Amok, the Water Tribe guy, he gave Yun poison training, and of course the guy who brought him in to be Yun's teacher was Jianzhu, so Jianzhu's done it as well. But Heiran is also here, so she's been poisoned as well as potentially any of the kitchen staff and just general staff that have taken some of this tea as well. So this is one of Jianzhu's most reckless acts here, is just poisoning everyone to stop this information getting out, taking out all of his enemies at once here by sort of sacrificing a bit of himself, but also Heiran in all of this. But we'll have to see what the exact result of this, who has survived, who hasn't, as we go into the coming chapters. But yeah, I like this chapter. I like these Jianzhu chapters because they are very different than the Kyoshi chapters, because Kyoshi's is very much development, getting her from the sort of very underdeveloped character from the start of the book, who is just a servant girl and that's all she wants to be, to this point, to being Avatar Kyoshi. The Jianzhu chapters are really his fall from grace, being in this amazing position as a sage, and the things that he's doing to still try and get the Avatar back into play under his guidance, and just what he'll do to get there. I really, really do like it. And then just a little bit on Heiran is just seeing her just like be so tired of all of this, and she just wants Rangi back, and she doesn't particularly care about the political power or anything like that anymore. She just wants her daughter back, this issue to be over, the scheming and plotting and the lies to be over, and she doesn't even know the full story. And I think that's the big thing in all of this, is that she doesn't know that Kelsang was killed by Jianzhu. But we'll get into that as we get into what happens with Heiran. But yeah, that's been my thoughts on chapter 29 of the book. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on this one. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.